My name is Alex. I am 32 and I work in tech, often pulling 60 to 70-hour weeks. But there is one place that still keeps me sane. 2 years ago, my grandmother passed away. We were incredibly close. Every summer growing up, I stayed at her cottage in Wavecrest Bay. Even as an adult, I visited whenever I could. She taught me to surf, showed me the hidden coves along the coast, and we spent hours on the deck talking about life while watching the sunset over the ocean. When her will was read, I was shocked to learn she left the cottage to me. Along with the deed came a handwritten letter that I still keep in my nightstand. In it she wrote that she had watched me find peace in that house, how the ocean seemed to heal something in me, and that she wanted me to always have that sanctuary. She specifically mentioned that she knew I needed a place to escape the pressures of modern life. My brother Ryan, who is 33, received an equal inheritance in cash roughly the same value as the cottage. My father Richard, 59, inherited her main residence, a beautiful colonial in the suburbs worth considerably more than either of our shares. Everyone seemed satisfied at the time. The cottage is modest, built in the 1960s, about an hour and a half from where I live. It needs constant maintenance, which I have lovingly provided. I kept her wind chimes on the porch, her collection of sea glass in the windows, and even her old coffee maker that only works if you hit it just right. I mainly use it on weekends and for occasional longer stays when I can work remotely. It has become essential to my mental health, my place to decompress, surf, read, and simply exist without constant notifications and demands. 6 months ago, things started to shift. It began with small comments from my father during family gatherings. He would say things like it was a shame that such a beautiful house sat empty during the week, or that 3 bedrooms for one person seemed excessive. I would laugh it off and explain that I got there as often as I could and that maintaining it was a labor of love. My brother Ryan started joining in these comments about 3 months ago. He talked about how his kids Lucas, 5, and Ava, 3, were getting cramped in their current home, how the schools near the beach were supposedly excellent, and how unfair it was that I got the prize of the inheritance while he just got money. He conveniently forgot that he had already spent that money on a boat he uses twice a year and a kitchen renovation. Last Sunday, during our monthly family dinner at my parents' house, they tag-teamed me in what felt like a planned attack. We had barely finished the main course when my father cleared his throat and launched into a prepared speech about family resources being used efficiently and how my grandmother, while meaning well, could not have foreseen how the family's needs would evolve. He used corporate-sounding phrases about maximizing utility and resource allocation. Ryan jumped in immediately, painting a picture of his kids growing up by the beach, learning to surf like we did, and building sandcastles every morning. His wife Megan chimed in with research she had apparently done on the local schools, showing me rankings on her phone and talking about how the sea air would be good for Lucas's asthma, a condition I had never heard mentioned before. The culmination was my father suggesting that I should either give the cottage to Ryan or sell it to him for a family discount of about 40% below market value. When I asked why Ryan could not just buy a place near the beach with his inheritance money, Megan actually laughed and said he had already spent it on responsible family investments, meaning the boat and their fancy kitchen that the kids are not allowed to eat in. I reminded them that my grandmother left specific instructions in her will that she wanted me to have that cottage. I even offered to read them a letter, though that felt too personal to share. My father's response chilled me. He said my mother was getting sentimental at the end and was not thinking clearly about what was best for the family's future. When I firmly said no, Ryan accused me of being selfish and said I just used the place as a bachelor pad for weekend parties. That is laughable to anyone who knows me. My idea of a wild weekend is reading 3 books and falling asleep on the deck at 9 p.m. My father shook his head and said he was disappointed in my lack of family values and my inability to CTH. A bigger picture, my mother Linda, who had been silent during dinner, later pulled me aside in the kitchen. She said she understood why I wanted to keep the cottage but asked if I would consider some kind of timeshare arrangement. Maybe they could have it during the summer months when the kids are off school, she suggested. When I pointed out that summer is when I use it most, she sighed and said I was putting her in an impossible position. Even my girlfriend Sophia, who is usually completely supportive, asked on the drive home if maybe I was being too rigid. She knows how much the cottage means to me. She has seen how my entire demeanor changes when we cross the bridge onto the island. But she also wondered if there was some compromise that could keep the family peace. I felt betrayed that even she was suggesting I should consider giving up my sanctuary. That night I could not sleep. I kept thinking about all the mornings I had watched the sunrise from the deck with coffee in hand, planning my day of surfing. The nights I had spent there after brutal work weeks, slowly feeling human again. The weekend I spent there after my last relationship ended, walking the beach for hours and finally feeling like myself again. How can I explain to them that it is not just a house? It is where I go to remember who I am. Am I really the bad one for wanting to keep my inherited property that was specifically left to me? The cottage means everything to me. It is not just about property value or having a weekend getaway. It is about having a place where I can breathe and exist without pretense or pressure. It is about honoring my grandmother's wishes and the bond we shared. But my entire family is making me feel like some kind of selfish monster for not handing over my inheritance to my brother just because he chose to have kids. Asterisk here's clean part 2. No tags, full sentences only. Under 10K characters. 2 weeks after that dinner I left work early on a Friday. It had been a brutal week, and I just needed to get to the cottage. The whole drive I felt my shoulders slowly relaxing as I looked forward to my usual weekend routine of opening all the windows to let the sea air in, making something simple for a dinner, and falling asleep to the sound of the waves. As I turned onto the coastal road, I noticed the increased traffic, but did not think much of it since tourist season was starting. When I pulled up to the house, my stomach dropped. My father's BMW was in the driveway along with Ryan's SUV and Megan's sedan. My usual parking spot under the old oak tree was blocked. I sat in my car for a moment trying to process what I was seeing. Through the windows I could see movement inside. The front door was wide open and my grandmother's wind chimes were singing in the breeze as if nothing was wrong. When I walked in, the scene was real. My father was at the dining table with papers spread out in front of him. Megan was in the kitchen cooking with my pans while Ryan opened a beer from my fridge. The kids were in the living room with toys scattered everywhere watching cartoons on my TV. They had even moved some of the furniture around. My father looked up casually and said they were having a family meeting about the cottage situation and that he thought neutral ground would be best for a productive discussion. I told him this was my house. Megan turned from the stove with a smile that did not reach her eyes and said they were making tacos and there was plenty if I was hungry. She added that she brought her own spices because my rack was a bit lacking. My nephew Lucas ran up to me holding one of my grandmother's old painted seashells from the mantel. He said his daddy told him this was going to be his room and pointed to the guest room with the ocean view that I use as my office. I tried to stay calm and told everyone they needed to leave because this was trespassing. Ryan laughed and said they were family and that my father had a key. I told him I had changed the locks 3 weeks earlier and asked how they got in. My father looked slightly uncomfortable and admitted that the property management company still had the old key on file from when my grandmother used them. He said he explained the situation and they understood about family needing access. I was shaking with rage. Not only had they broken into my house, but they had manipulated a local business my grandmother had trusted for decades. I noticed Megan's notebook open on the counter with sketches of kid-friendly renovations that included removing my grandmother's built-in bookshelves to make room for a toy storage. I told them they had 1 hour to leave or I was calling the police. My father stood up to his full height and asked if I would really call the police on my own family. He said my grandmother would be ashamed because she valued family above everything. I shot back that she also valued respect and boundaries, which is why she left me the cottage in the first place. The situation deteriorated quickly. Megan started crying and said I was traumatizing the children by threatening their parents. Ryan accused me of being exactly what is wrong with millennials: selfish and materialistic and putting property over people. My father pulled out his phone and called my mother, putting her on speaker so she could talk sense into me. The final straw came when I went to use the bathroom and found Ryan in my bedroom with a measuring tape checking if their California king bed would fit. He had even moved some of my things round to visualize the new layout. On my dresser right next to the photo of my grandmother and me from my college graduation, he had placed a sticky note that said "Move to the garage." I lost it completely. I yelled at him to get out and told him he had no right to even think about touching my private space. He tried to gaslight me and said I was overreacting and that he was just planning for the inevitable. That is when I called the police right there in front of them. While we waited, my father tried every manipulation tactic he knew. He talked about family legacy and how my grandmother's house should be filled with children's laughter and how I was choosing to be alone and bitter. Megan packed up her taco supplies with theatrical sighs and told the kids that Uncle Alex did not want them there. Lucas started crying and asked why I was being mean. When the officers arrived, I showed them my deed, explained the situation, and showed them text messages from 3 weeks earlier that explicitly stated no one was welcome at the property without my express permission. My father tried to argue that it was just a civil family dispute that did not require police intervention. The officers disagreed and told everyone to leave immediately. As they gathered their things, Ryan hissed that I was everything wrong with my generation and that I would die alone in that house. Megan loudly told the children that some people value things more than family. My father said nothing directly to me, but the look he gave me was meant to convey complete disappointment and disgust. After they left, I saw the small changes they had already made. They moved my coffee maker to make room for a kid's snack station. There were juice boxes in my fridge. They had even started a grocery list on my whiteboard, crossing off items I had listed and adding their own. The violation felt much deeper than just trespassing. They tried to erase me from my own space. I spent that night installing new smart locks that I could control remotely and security cameras around the entire property. I also hired a lawyer to send a formal cease and desist letter to all of them, making it clear that any further attempt to enter the property would result in criminal charges. The family fallout was swift and brutal. My mother started calling every day, crying about how the family was torn apart. Extended relatives I had not spoken to in years reached out to tell me I was being unreasonable. My cousin posted on Facebook about how some people forget where they come from and think they are too good for a family. I had to block most of them. Sophia has been supportive but frustrated with all the drama. She does not understand why they cannot just respect my boundaries. She even suggested selling the cottage just to end the conflict, but I refused. Why should I give up my inheritance and my sanctuary because they feel entitled to it? I am heading back this weekend, and honestly I'm anxious. Part of me expects to find broken windows or worse. The peace I once found there feels tainted now, but I'm determined to reclaim it. This is my house, my inheritance, and my connection to my grandmother. I will not let them take that from me. Yesterday, I decided to leave work at noon. I had been anxious all week about returning to the cottage, but figured driving in broad daylight would feel safer. The drive felt different this time. Instead of relaxing, I spent 2 hours with my shoulders tense, checking the security camera app every time I hit a red light. Everything looked normal on the cameras, but I could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. As I turned onto my street, I immediately knew my instincts were right. There were cars everywhere, including Ryan's SUV, a large moving truck, my father's BMW, and several cars I did not recognize. My security app had not alerted me because they had approached from the beach side to avoid the cameras. I pulled over a few houses down and called my lawyer. He advised me to document everything and call the police immediately if they were inside. With shaking hands, I started recording video on my phone and walked toward the house. The front door was wide open with boxes stacked on the porch. I could hear voices inside with multiple people talking and laughing. Through the window I saw strangers, movers carrying furniture. My furniture was being carried out while other furniture was being carried in. I walked through my own front door to find my worst nightmare realized. The living room was in chaos. My couch was gone and replaced with Ryan and Megan's sectional. My grandmother's antique coffee table was pushed against the wall, and a child-proof monstrosity sat in its place. The walls I had spent a weekend carefully touching up were already marked with crayon. Megan was in the kitchen unpacking and placing her dishes into my cabinets as if this was perfectly normal. My grandmother's china, which I still use every Sunday morning exactly like she did, was boxed up on the counter labeled Gush. The kids were running round with toys everywhere. Eva had taken over the spot where I keep my surfboards, and a dollhouse now sat exactly where my board rack used to be. Lucas was jumping on bubble wrap in the hallway shouting about his new house. But the worst part was my father. He stood in the middle of it all like a general directing movers with my belongings. He told them my bookshelf could go to the gouge, and that we would not be needing my bar cart. I stood there for a full 30 seconds before Megan noticed me. When she did, she smiled and said they were not expecting me until tonight, and that they had saved my bedroom from me because they thought I would want to keep visiting on weekends. I told them to get out right now. Ryan appeared from the back deck where he had been assembling a massive playset. He said we should talk rationally because they were already here and the kids were enrolled in school starting Monday. Fighting this would only hurt everyone. My father approached and put his hand on my shoulder in that condescending way he has. He said it was time to face reality because I was a single man with a demanding job who barely used the place while Ryan had a family that needed it. He claimed my grandmother would understand because family needs change. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. That is when everything exploded. My father actually tried to grab the phone from my hand and shouted that this was a family matter and not to be ridiculous. I stepped back and kept the phone to my ear while telling the operator that my family was stealing my house and to send police immediately. Ryan came charging in from the deck and yelled that they were my family and that our parents had given me life, so why did I get everything? I shouted back that he got the same inheritance I did, but he spent his on a boat and a kitchen renovation, and that was not my fault. Megan started crying with loud theatrical sobs and asked how I could do this to the children because they thought this was their home now and the parents had told them they would grow up by the beach. I told her she lied to them just like she was lying now by pretending they had any right to be there. My father turned red with rage and dropped the bomb. He said he had already spoken to lawyers, and that because I originally gave him a key it established a pattern of family access. He claimed they were establishing residency and that I would have to formally evict them, which takes months. By then I would come to my senses and realize this was best for everyone. I told him I had changed the locks and that he broke in. He countered that they proved they had previous access and that the property management company confirmed he had a key for his, so no breaking was required. That is when I realized this was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. They had planned it. They had consulted lawyers, manipulated local businesses, enrolled the kids in school, and hired movers. This was a coordinated attack on my property and my life. The 911 operator had heard everything and assured me officers were on the way. The next 15 minutes were the longest of my life. Megan alternated between sobbing and trying to gild me by showing me the kids' drawings of their beach house. Ryan paced like a caged animal and occasionally threw out insults about my selfishness and my inability to maintain relationships. My father was the worst. He turned cold and calculating and started talking about how my grandmother had privately told him she hoped I would grow up and share with my brother. When I called him a liar, he said I was too blinded by greed to see the truth. Other movers quietly approached me and said they had been told this was a family property transfer and that all parties were in agreement. He showed me the work order. Ryan had forged my signature. When the police arrived with 3 cars and lights flashing, the narrative my family tried to spin was incredible. My father claimed I had agreed to let Ryan try living there for the summer. Megan wailed about the children being made homeless. Ryan accused me of having rich boy syndrome and said I was probably on drugs to be acting so irrationally. I showed the officers my documentation, including the deed, the cease and desist letter my lawyer had sent, text messages explicitly denying them access, and the security footage of them arriving with a moving truck. The forged signature on the moving company paperwork sealed it. The lead officer told everyone they needed to leave immediately or face arrest for breaking and entering, criminal trespassing, and fraud. That is when 5-year-old Lucas ran up to me with tears streaming down his face and asked why I was stealing their house. He said his daddy told him I did not need it and they did, and asked if I did not love them. My heart broke. This innocent child had been weaponized against me. They had filled his head with lies, and now he thought I was the villain. I knelt down and told him I loved him very much, but that this was not his house, and that his daddy had made a mistake. Ryan yanked his son away and told him not to talk to me because Uncle Alex cared more about houses than family. As the police supervised their exit, the scene was chaos. Megan had to repack boxes while sobbing about school enrollment fees they would lose. Ryan loaded his kids into the car while loudly telling them that some people are just selfish and that is why they end up alone. My father said nothing directly to me but told the officers this was family business and that I would regret getting law enforcement involved. The movers had to reload everything and take it back. It took 3 hours to get everyone out and my belongings back in place. After everyone left, I called a locksmith for an emergency visit. While waiting, I discovered the full extent of what they had done. They had forwarded mail to my address in Ryan's name. There were children's life preservers hanging in my shed. They had installed child safety gates at the top and bottom of the stairs. In my office, my desk had been dismantled and pushed against the wall to make room for bunk beds that were halfway assembled. The locksmith installed new high-security locks that cannot be picked or duplicated without my authorization. I also called a security company to install a comprehensive system with cameras covering every angle, motion sensors, and direct connection to the local police. That night, I could not stay in the house. It felt violated like a crime scene. I drove to a hotel an hour away and finally broke down with full-body sobs. The house my grandmother left me and my sanctuary had been turned into a battlefield. I spent the next day with my lawyer. We filed charges for breaking and entering, fraud, and forgery and sought a restraining order against all of them. The lawyer said their residency plan was legally nonsense and likely came from some sovereign citizen website rather than actual legal advice. We are also suing for damages because they caused about $3,000 worth of damage to the walls and floors during their move-in attempt. My phone has not stopped ringing. My mother left 17 voicemails, each more hysterical than the last. Extended family members called me a monster. Someone posted on social media about how I called the police on children and made a family homeless out of greed. I have received death threats from people I went to high school with, but I am done. I am done feeling guilty. I am done being manipulated. I am done with their entitlement. They could have asked to visit. They could have requested to rent it for a week. If they had approached me with respect and understanding, I might have even offered to let them use it occasionally. Instead, they tried to steal my house, traumatize children with their lies, and destroy my family in the process. I have blocked them all on everything. I am proceeding with all legal charges. The restraining order should be in place soon. My therapist says what they did was criminal and abusive, and that I should feel no guilt for protecting myself and my property. Sophia has been my rock through this. She has fielded calls, helped me sort through the legal paperwork, and reminded me that I am not crazy. We are planning to go to the cottage together next weekend to properly clean and reclaim it. She suggested a cleansing ceremony with burning sage and making new memories to override the violation. I know I will likely never have a relationship with my father or brother again. That ship has not just sailed. They set it on fire and sank it. My mother might be salvageable someday, but not while she is enabling them. The extended family can think what they want. They have shown their true colors. My grandmother left me that cottage because she knew I would cherish it, respect it, and find peace there. I failed to protect it once, but never again. It is mine legally and morally, and I will be damned if I let anyone make me feel guilty for that. To anyone dealing with entitled family, document everything. Change your locks, install cameras, get a lawyer, and do not feel guilty for 1 second about protecting what is yours. Family is not about blood. It is about respect, love, and boundaries. Anyone who tries to violate those is not family worth having.